My name is Dr. Ian Storch. I'm a board-certified gastroenterologist and osteopathic physician, and you are listening to DO or Do Not. If you're interested in joining our team or have suggestions or comments, please contact us at doordonotpodcast.com. Share our link with your friends and like us on Apple Podcasts, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. We hope you enjoy this episode.
Hello, my name is Suzanne Char, and I'm a third-year medical student at Ohio University Heritage College of Osteopathic Medicine, and you are listening to DO or Do Not. Today, we're thrilled to welcome Dr. Kris Belland, a retired Navy flight surgeon and the first osteopathic physician to serve as the president of the Aerospace Medical Association. Dr. Belland, the American Osteopathic Association, who are spearheading an effort to educate physicians about patient safety and foster a culture of transparency and responsibility. Dr. Belland graduated from the Philadelphia College of Osteopathic Medicine and has dedicated his career to improving patient safety by drawing on lessons from high reliability industries like aviation and nuclear power. He shares his unique perspective on how these industries structured approaches to risk management of risk mitigation can be applied to healthcare to prevent medical error. In our conversation, Dr. Belland explained the importance of occupational and preventive medicine, describing the role and responsibilities of physicians with these training. With a background in both aviation and medicine, he has been in the front lines of aerospace medicine, having served in combat zones, ensuring the readiness of our nation's elite aviator and fostering trust with his osteopathic philosophy of holistic care. His journey highlights the incredible impact that osteopathic principles can have, from taking care of aviators in high-stress environment to his leadership in advancing healthcare on global scale. Join us as we talk about his extraordinary career, the role of flight surgeon, the intersection of osteopathic medicine and aerospace, and much more.
Kris Belland, thank you so much for being with us today.
Very good, Ian. Thank you so much for allowing me to be here.
I met you at OMED, and specifically Dr. Jen Howler introduced us and felt that you would be a great person to be on the podcast to talk about the patient safety initiative that you're starting up with the American Osteopathic Association. So can you tell us a little bit about what that is and what you're doing?
A little bit about my background is I started out in United States Navy and Naval Academy, and then went into naval aviation, and 40 years later retired. And I was the very first osteopathic physician to be president of the Aerospace Medical Association. That's less than 100 years old. Aerospace is less than 100 years. But what I learned in what we call a high reliability organization, aviation, is that there's a lot to be learned, and we can apply lessons to medicine. There's a little difference between checklists and mishaps. Unfortunately, in the civilian sector, things can go wrong with patients. In aviation, if there's one aircraft lost, it's very high visibility. There's a stand down, you do an investigation, you learn lessons learned, root cause analysis, and you apply those lessons learned to get better. That's a high reliability organization. Medicine is not yet a high reliability organization.
I know we spoke a little bit, and I've taken some courses. I think it's super interesting on medical errors. And for the general docs that are listening, you and I spoke a little bit about the Swiss cheese model of medical errors. Can you talk to us a little bit about that? I think that's very interesting.
If we think of aviation and space travel as high reliability organizations, and so is nuclear power, by the way, and special operations, you start to look at what they have done to be able to get better at reducing mishaps. One of the things that I learned while I was in the Navy on active duty, we had a spike in mishaps at the Naval Strike and Air Warfare Center. It was in Fallon, Nevada. It was Top Gun. That's where Top Gun is at. We had 5 Class Alpha mishaps, over $1 million loss of life or permanent damage to the aviators. And it caused a lot of visibility. You have a small number and it causes a lot of interest. You had a 30-day stand down. We did that very structured analysis of all of our mishaps, and we looked back for 10 years. And there's this thing called human factors analysis classification. It's the way to bin mishaps. And there's latent conditions, which are lying behind the scene, like not enough money, not enough training, not the right people flying together. And then there's active conditions where you turn left and you should have turned right. But knowing that we have these different bins, that's based on this Swiss cheese theory, or James Reason's Swiss cheese theory of risk mitigation. And think about it, you're walking through life and you have these layers, we call them Swiss cheese because there's holes in them, and they're all around you, 360 degrees like a ball. And there's different layers. And as long as the holes don't line up, you're protected by those layers of Swiss cheese. But if all those holes line up, then that could result in a mishap. You could think about maybe a bullet coming through your layers and then hitting you and causing an adverse outcome. So James Reason came up with this Swiss cheese theory. He studied nuclear power mishaps and collisions at sea. And then the DoD, Scott Chappell and Doug Wigman, applied it to aviation. It really fit very, very nicely. And then actually the DoD bought off on it, and it is becoming more common in the hospital setting, the Swiss cheese theory. And the idea is that, one, you want to look back on your mishaps, identify, let's say, for example, the top 5 reasons, and we did that in Fallon, Nevada, the top 5 reasons at NSOC and Top Gun that people were killing themselves. Now, I took those top 5 reasons and rebriefed the aviators before they flew on their flights. And every air wing goes up to Fallon. They do a month-long advanced PhD level strike fighter training. They fight into bad territory. They fight against the enemy, drop their bombs, fight back. So we would do that training up there. So I would brief them. Here's the top 5 ways guys and gals have killed themselves. Here's 5 ways to keep from killing yourself. And we had their attention. They listened to it. There was credibility. I was a flight surgeon pilot. I flew F-18 Hornets at the time. So I had a credibility of being recognized as an aviator and also as a flight surgeon. So the Swiss cheese theory not only works for decreasing mishaps, very high visibility mishaps in the DoD or civilian, it applies very nicely to the medical arena where you have a mishap, adverse outcome, wrong site surgery. There's things that you could learn. What we found out, and I investigated 30 mishaps, including 12 ejection seat mishaps, that the errors we do, we make them over and over again. And we haven't been learning from our prior incidents and issues. Now, there's this publication called To Err is Human. And it was done, I think, back in the early 2000s. And it showed that almost a fully loaded 747 worth of people 3 times a week would die from errors, hospital errors. That's amazing. In the United States, if one 747 crashed, everyone would be up in arms. This is 3 a week. Well, the study was repeated. And the repeat of the study shows it's almost 1 a day, right? So that's why I say medicine is not yet a high reliability organization. It needs to be. So this one thing that worked out so well in aviation, this James Reason Swiss cheese theory, plugs the holes. It identifies what they are ahead of time. It reduces them and adds layers and redundancy to reduce the risk. You'll never, ever have 0 risk, particularly in aviation, particularly with patients. There's too many wild cards. There's too many things, but we could reduce the overall risk by using things like the Swiss cheese theory.
So, Kris, just to break it down from a medical perspective, and I always talk to my staff in the office based on that course that I took, and I talk to them about the Swiss cheese theory all the time. And fortunately, we're talking about minor near misses and not wrong site surgery in my office. But when something goes wrong, it's not just one person's fault, right? The secretary forgot to have the patient sign in. Nobody checked to make sure that the patient hadn't shown up. And then the doctor didn't come and look for the patient. And then the patient sat in the waiting room for 3 hours without being put in a room. Just to use a silly example. Would you say it's something like that? Is that usually how those things happen?
Absolutely. And that's the case. We've studied organizations that are even the best of the best, like the Blue Angels and the Top Gun organization, and they've had their mishaps also. And we see that very high reliable organizations have a safety culture. where it is just amazing. People realize that we're imperfect and inhuman. And one, you have to speak up. If you see something, you got to say something. If you're uncomfortable, a lot of people say it's that feeling in their belly. You and I have been in medical positions or cases where things aren't going in the direction they should go in. And maybe we're a very junior person. We don't want to say anything. Sometimes nurses feel that the power position structure for physicians and nurses will adversely impact them if they say anything. So it really is striving towards a high reliability organization, a culture that is a just and a safe culture where people are comfortable about working and admitting error. I can't tell you how many times I've seen something adverse happen and the people, sometimes will deny it happened, particularly if it becomes litigious or legal gets brought into it. There has to be a higher level of play, and that is that we improve, we get better, we learn from our mistakes. We work together as a team, and that Blue Angels team is a great example of that, in that those guys and gals work together so well. They rehearse, they repeat, they have checklists. And I'll tell you, being an aviator with over 2,000 flight hours and 125 combat missions, there has never been a perfect flight. There is never, you learn from each one of those flights. Any aviator that tells you it was a perfect flight, it just ain't the case. There is something that goes wrong or could be done better on each and every flight.
Yeah, so Kris, exactly as you're saying, it's interesting. I feel like as a physician, a lot of times we're required to do a lot of courses and training and things that sometimes feel very mundane and boring and just taking time out of our day. But I feel like the medical error classes that I've taken, I always walk away with something, specifically the points that you made. Sometimes I think about communication points that they make where somebody says something and you make sure that, did you give 20 milligrams of epi? And the response is, yes, I gave 20 milligrams of epi, to make sure that you're closing the loop and those type of things. What is the AOA asking, or what specifically is your role? What are you mounting with this program through the American Osteopathic Association?
Because of my background in aerospace medicine, I have always thought when I've been active duty that there are so many great lessons that could be applied to medicine. Example, operating room. I did general surgery internship at Oakland Naval Hospital. I saw some bad adverse outcomes which could have been prevented. But if we applied the things that we do in aviation or nuclear power to the environment of medicine, I think we'd have better outcomes. The patients would do better, would have less adverse effects and impact over time. And you raise a really good question and gets into that cultural concept and how you feel about safety. If your attitude is, hey, I'm going to learn as much about this. And my compatriots in the Civil Aviation Medical Association is a physician named Story Musgrave. And Story is just, it's a wonderful background for him. He's a NASA astronaut, now retired, but he'll come back and talk to the organizations that he's worked with throughout his life. He was an enlisted Marine. He became a physician and an astronaut. He helped repair the Hubble telescope when it had some mirror distortions in it. And he comes back to his organizations to help learn lessons. And I think one of the things that Story Musgrave says, whatever organization you're in, don't only learn enough to get by. Learn enough so that you could understand it and you could positively influence it, so that when you go to a new organization, that template you've learned, and think about his background and career in the Marine Corps, and then also as a physician, and then at NASA, those templates that he learned previously, he applied to the new organization he worked in. So you want to bring forward the best, and then you'll have a much smaller gap, much smaller holes in the Swiss cheese theory that you're going to have to fill because you've learned previously. But I think really that what you've mentioned, the attitude, the communication, and really realizing that this is a key piece that will help you perform medicine better.
Can you tell us a little bit about occupational and preventative medicine and what that means, and what a doctor that is involved in that specialty would do?
I wish I would have known when I was a young physician or at Philadelphia College of Osteopathic Medicine. My wife and I both graduated from there and went into the Navy. I wish I would have known about occupational health and preventive medicine back then. Number one, the lowest burnout rate of any specialty is the occupational health and preventive medicine area. So occupational health, the way I would present it to somebody that hasn't worked in the arena before is think about somebody working on a plane or in a facility that produces something, manufacturing. An occupational health person does exams to make sure people are healthy, they stay healthy, and when something adverse happens, like for example, hexavalent chromium exposure, they know what to do, how to document it, what to look for. Also, an occupational health physician can walk through a facility and do a walk around and make recommendations to reduce risk. So if you really think about it, occupational health doc really works in that realm of the Swiss cheese theory, where they prevent injury, death, or damage ahead of time. They also can do physical exams on people that are injured. They could document it appropriately, make sure people are getting the care that they need, and legally have the documentation to protect the corporation, but also to document the care for the individual in case there's later litigation. So being objective and truthful is very, very important in the occupational health arena, and understanding occupational health rules. At American Airlines, it was absolutely amazing, from baggage handlers to flight attendants to pilots. The preventive medicine is just astounding to be able to influence that in a positive way. Preventive medicine is a general category that aerospace medicine falls under. Correctional medicine actually falls under that also. Preventive medicine is avoiding injury or accidents as they go. I went to the Uniformed Services University of Health Sciences for their preventive medicine residency, and there I got a master's in public health. They have an MPH for 1 year. You learn about biostatistics, epidemiology. You learn how to study problems and issues, and then be able to apply that to prevent or reduce types of injuries. Aerospace, like I said, is one of those. Undersea medicine is also a preventive medicine categorization, as well as the correctional medicine that I referred to before. And if you think about it, and I'll just get a little bit off here on topic, but the anatomy, physiology, and medicine, very, very similar. As a matter of fact, they are very close together in their organizations. And think about it, PV equals nRT, pressure, oxygen. If you're in a submarine, it's a pressurized cabin. If you're in an airplane, it's a pressurized cabin. If you're up in space, it's a pressurized cabin. So a lot of those different physiologic and medical precepts are true for all three of those environments. And some have suggested maybe there should be a extreme medicine and have those all fall under it. But very few medical mishaps in NASA and space so far, which is great news, because a lot of preventive medicine has worked. But now with the emerging civilian space, with Blue Origin, Axiom, to name a few, X, there will be a lot more people going to space that will have a lot more medical problems and issues. So yeah, exactly. And that's really the Wild West. And that will require a lot of preventive medicine. So occupational health, preventive medicine.
My follow-up is, if someone listening was interested in going down this path, does it have to be through the military, or are there civilian ways to pursue?
Ah, brilliant. Thanks. I was just talking to a young osteopathic physician applying for the residency in aerospace medicine just 2 hours ago, and he asked the same question. So yeah, there's many avenues or routes to get to where you want to go. So let's say you go through the military. You can go to the Naval Academy, West Point, Air Force Academy, or go ROTC. You go to medical school, MD or DO. There is a military medical school called Uniformed Services University of Health Science. So let's go to the baseline that you have your MD or DO degree. Then there's a couple of avenues to go. One is the military. Of course, even with civilian training, you could apply for military programs, or the civilian route. And there's two ways to kind of get to the next level. One is a flight surgeon level or an aviation medical examiner level. Flight surgeon is Army, Navy, Air Force. In the Navy, Navy physicians take care of the Marines. These are combined. And there's the FAA has an aviation medical examiner course that they have. It's 5 days long. You have to recertify every 3 years, become an aviation medical examiner. Flight surgeons in the Air Force, I think it's 5 or 6 weeks training, as it is the Army. The Navy flight surgery course is 6 months long. There's a lot of reasons for that, flying off aircraft carriers. We could get into that. So then you're either an AME or a flight surgeon. You could do a lot of your career at that level. If you really love aerospace and you want to be board certified, you need a residency in aerospace medicine. Here again, there's kind of the military and the civilian route. The military route are the Army, Navy, and Air Force have residency in aerospace medicine physician residency spots. The Mayo Clinic has a residency. I think they're getting rid of their fellowship. The UTMB has a residency in aerospace medicine, also a combined internal medicine, aerospace medicine, and a combined emergency medicine and aerospace medicine. So those routes could get you trained. There are also, and this is because it is the Wild West and aerospace medicine's not even 100 years old yet, emergency medicine is trying to stake their claim to space medicine. And there are 6 fellowships that have stood up in space medicine supported by emergency medicine. They're not currently board certified or credentialed, and the people that work in space medicine don't necessarily recognize the fellowship training at this time. Will be interesting to watch that as it goes down the road. This is an important point because you may ask, how come space medicine is combined with aviation, aerospace medicine? Well, 50 years ago, they had this discussion early on with the moon missions. Should we separate space from aviation? The decision back then was you have to go through aviation, and to get to space, you got to come back through air aviation to land on the Earth. We're still having that discussion. We have stayed combined ever since. As a matter of fact, we're closer with undersea medicine than we ever have been before because the anatomy, physiology, and medicine are very, very similar. But like I said, this will always be a little bit of a back and forth. We're at the Wild West as it goes. It'll be interesting to see as we go. But Serena Anand, who is a NASA flight surgeon and NASA astronaut, said it best when she spoke at the Aerospace Medical Association conference. We had a meeting specifically about this. And she said that, no, they need to stay together because the anatomy, physiology, and if you go to space, you got to come through aviation. The other thing is most everyone who becomes an astronaut, either through the NASA program or the international programs, have some kind of aviation in their background and training. And when you become an astronaut, you have to maintain your certification in aviation. So anyways, those two are going to stay combined, at least for the near future. Maybe way in the future, there will be a sub-category of space medicine, but right now they're combined.
Kris, can you tell us a little bit about Aerospace Medical Strategic Consultants and what your role is in that company?
I'm kind of an old guy. And I was in the Navy for almost 40 years. And I served as a flight surgeon pilot. I was qualified in the F-18 Hornet to fly that aircraft and was very, very blessed coming up through the ranks, selected for command. I was for those people who see the movie Top Gun, the 3 admirals that are in the Top Gun movie, I actually worked for those guys, Warlock, Cyclone, and Iceman. In real life, they were Richard, Killer, and Not So. And I was 4 years at INSOC and Top Gun, and then 4 years at Naval Air Forces. And my last 2 years was in the Pacific Fleet as a Pacific Fleet surgeon. Wonderful career. After that, I got out and was the chief medical officer for American Airlines. Did that for a couple of years. Then I worked for the Flight Attendant and Pilots Union, and then deputy regional flight surgeon for the FAA. So I learned if you haven't figured it out, I love aerospace medicine. It's my passion. It's the reason I wake up in the morning. I absolutely love it. My family's right up there, don't get me wrong, but I love aerospace medicine. But I got to the point where, hey, I didn't like, I'd already retired and I don't have to work to live or live to work, but I still love aerospace medicine. So I talked to my mentors. That's the other really good point for young guys and gals. Find somebody you want to be like and ask them how to get there. So Jeff Davis, who was a prior NASA medical officer, prior American Airlines chief medical officer, and Aerospace Medical Association president, is my mentor. And he helped me set up a professional limited liability corporation. And that is the Aerospace Medicine Strategic Consultation, or ASMIS. Like I say, I love aerospace. I've been handling subject matter expert legal cases. I've been also working for a company called AeroCleanse, where we're bringing UVC light into the cockpit, very well coordinated, controlled, engineered to be protected, and turn off if somebody gets directly under it to help decrease disease transmission and translocation. The other company I work with is Trek Secure as a chief medical advisor. And we've learned lessons from the pandemic. That's a whole nother meeting where we talk about that. But Trek Secure sets up information technology so that countries could handle pandemics and outbreaks of pandemics. So as you get older, I would highly recommend be your own boss, set up an LLC. It is so much better.
Kris, we're going to shift gears a little bit and we're just going to talk specifically about you and your career and how you got to where you are. Can you tell us where you grew up, where you went to college, when you decided you wanted to be a doctor, and when you found out about osteopathic medicine?
I grew up in Pacifica, California, which is about 15 miles south of San Francisco. I was a seventh generation Californian. Absolutely loved being on the West Coast. Got picked up for the Naval Academy. I loved sailing with my dad. My dad said there's a school where you could sail at. It's a sailing school. I said, cool. So applied and got in. I went for all the wrong reasons, but I think I stayed for all the right reasons. And really, almost 40 years later, retired from the Navy at PAC Fleet, at one of the best jobs in the world. When I became a senior first class at the Naval Academy, they were bringing back the medical program. And the academic dean, Dean Wisely, said, hey, we've had success with getting midshipmen into osteopathic medical schools. PCOM is a great one. We've had great students go there and do wonderful things in the military. So I applied there. He wrote a letter of recommendation. I got an interview, got accepted. So I went and did the medical program from the Naval Academy. I've never looked back. The osteopathic, the difference that DO makes has really been important to my life. And I could tell you instances working on an aircraft carrier flight deck in combat operations, some of the aviators having neck pain and low back pain from flying under Gs multiple times a day, being able to do manipulation. But I think even a higher level is the philosophy that we're taught in an osteopathic school on how to deal with people holistically as human beings. I think that helped out a lot where I was accepted in being part of the squadrons that I flew with and was able to better take care of aviators. I was an air wing flight surgeon and then found out about the dual designator program. I said earlier, try to find somebody you want to be like. My person that I wanted to be like was a guy named Dave Brown. He was a physician picked up for flight training. Dave gave me his package on how to apply for flight training. And he says, it's going to take you 3 times. You got to be persistent and you're going to get picked up. And it happened. So I went through flight training. Dave, during that time, got picked up from NASA to be an astronaut. So after I was out in the fleet doing the best job I could possibly do, I said, hey, Dave, can I get your NASA application package? He says, yep, here you go. So I applied 3 times. Unfortunately, I made it right up to the interview phase, but didn't make astronaut. But it made me a better person, right? Shooting for the stars. That's what I tell young guys and gals to do is really shoot for the stars. It'll make you a better person, work harder, and be better overall. So after the military experience, and during that time, I was the president, first DO to be the president of the Aerospace Medical Association. I started to see that there was a higher level that you could get involved in and influence not only aerospace medicine, but medicine in general. So that's when I started to get more involved in the United Nations and ICAO. There was a CAPSCA organization that got together to handle pandemics. And so I was working with that nights and weekends, and we were meeting weekly during the COVID-19 pandemic. International air travel, of course, was a huge translocation and transmission vector that we needed to address, and we handled that the best we possibly could. So that's in a nutshell of kind of the career and how I ended up here.
That's amazing. I want to tease out a couple of points for those of us that don't know exactly what a flight surgeon does on a regular basis is one of my questions. And then I was reading that you've flown in like F-14 Tomcats. I mean, that sounds just super cool. Even though I have a light stomach, I don't think it would be great for me. But can you tell us a little bit about like what the daily life of a flight surgeon is like, what that job entails, and then specifically what it's like step foot in a Tomcat?
Yeah, I'm an old guy, so looking back on this and kind of smiling and recalling this is wonderful. And I really love these questions you're asking. So a flight surgeon, let's kind of go back in the very beginning days. of sailing, wooden sailing ships, they aboard the ship would have a ship surgeon. And usually the ship surgeon wasn't really the sharpest tool. Well, actually, they had the sharpest tools. They're the barbers. Because usually the treatment for any type of major injury was to cut off an extremity. And they needed somebody who was strong and had sharp instruments. So even today, they refer to surgeons in London as Mr. instead of doctors, because it was really kind of not a high aspiring position. So when you talk about the ship surgeon, they took that concept. Star Trek too. Gene Roddenberry had Dr. McCoy. He was the ship surgeon. Well, the Navy adopted that general concept, and we would have flight surgeons. It doesn't mean that you're a pilot or you're a surgeon, you're going to do surgery in flight. Just like the ship surgeon, you're a general doc that takes care of those that fly. And generally in the Navy, depending on the squadrons, they have one flight surgeon per squadron. On an aircraft carrier, they have 7 squadrons, 2 flight surgeons, and a physician assistant as a flight surgeon extender. As a flight surgeon in the military, you'll go through the Navy, the 6-month flight training. They have it's primary training for aviation. You actually get to fly aircraft and see what that's like, going through checklists, learning those high reliability organizations. And then there's 2 months of anatomy and physiology and up chits and down chits and how to be a flight surgeon. And there's usually about 35 to 40 flight surgeons in 3 flight surgeon training classes a year at Naval Aerospace Medical Institute. They'll then go out to the fleet and they'll cover those 12 air wings that go on aircraft carriers. And the Marine Corps also has an extensive aviation community. The Navy covers both. The Navy physicians cover both the Navy and the Marine Corps. So a Navy physician actually will wear a Marine Corps uniform, except with the Medical Corps insignia on their collar, and they're all under the Navy Medical Corps. But flight surgeons take care of aviators. They do their up chits, their down chits. If they have medical problems or issues, they deal with that. There's a whole structure for somebody who has a complicated medical history and getting them back up. And what we do in the military is we embed our flight surgeons with the squadrons. And the Navy requires 50% of your time not being in the clinic, but be with flying and being with the squadron in squadron time. So you're accepted. Now, the aviators know that, hey, we like you, you fly with us, you're a good person, you're kind of a squadron member, but you could also permanently down us. So there is a natural friction there. And that's why being an osteopathic physician where I could relate and deal with people and be honest and straightforward, and my goal was to keep them flying as long as possible, I think paid huge dividends for me in my career. So that's a flight surgeon. So F-14s, when my first air wing tour was with Air Wing 5 in Japan, my wife had talked to her detailer in the Navy, and my detailer, the only co-location they could put us was in Japan. I was on the Midway, USS Midway aircraft carrier, and my wife was stationed at Yokosuka Naval Hospital. Unbeknownst to us, the carrier had to be out of port 8 months a year. So you could start figuring the back figuring that. I was away a whole lot during my 2-year tour. The Midway was a small aircraft carrier, so it did not have F-14s on board. It had 3 A-6 squadrons, which was awesome. During Desert Storm, they dropped more tonnage than any aircraft carrier. But what we did is we did a swap out. During my tour, took the Midway to Pearl Harbor. Kitty Hawk came out. We cross-decked over to the Kitty Hawk. Kitty Hawk had a longer deck. So we picked up 2 F-14 squadrons. And the F-14 squadrons were the older F-14s. My next air wing tour, we had the F-14 Deltas, and I flew with them. This was the cool part. And like I said, the difference that DO makes is I really took care of the guys and gals. I didn't care whether they flew helicopters, E-2s, or if they were F-14 pilots. But you learn a different culture. You fly with the guys and gals, you become a member of the squadron. So I got qualified as it's an air crew. It's not only a flight surgeon, but it's air crews. You have to pass all the testing in NATOPS, it's called, for every aircraft on the aircraft carrier. So F-14s, A-6s, EA-6Bs, S-3s, H-60s, E-2 Hawkeyes. I was qualified and I flew in every one of those aircraft off an aircraft carrier. The F-14s I flew with. I love the attitude and the culture, the fighter mentality. It was wonderful. It had pluses and minuses associated with it. but I had to go through the training and get signed off and qualified to fly in the backseat of F-14. And the pinnacle of that was they trusted me enough to bring me into combat. So I actually got into areas, it was in Iraq where they were shooting back at us, and we were flying high enough so the SAMs wouldn't get us, but you could see the muzzle flashes on the ground kind of stuff. So I had a couple of flights in the F-14 in combat, which was absolutely amazing. You had to learn all the emergency procedures and go through the tests and all that kind of stuff. And the more you do it, it's kind of like, well, I guess surgery for surgeons. The more you do it, the more it just becomes second nature. When we would pull in for a couple of days off of flying into a port, aircraft were just sitting there and everyone would take it easy. You get rusty, right? Because you weren't flying 2 times a day. Then we'd get underway and the aircraft would have all kinds of problems and maintenance problems. But after we were flying for a day or two, everything got oiled and was working well. Aircraft we get into this routine where everything is just working amazingly and you're flying once or twice a day. I'd spend half my time down in medical and then half my time in the squadron. And of course, you try to line up flights during that time. And F-14 is just an amazing aircraft. Some of the pictures they show, the older F-14 with all those little circuit breakers, Tom Cruise is flying and they got the guy in the back that's what it looks like. You got to know which circuit breakers to pull when things don't work.
But when you're flying, like I'm picturing Maverick and Goose. So you're like Goose, is that right? Like there's Maverick in the front and you're Goose in the back?
Yeah, they put the pilot in the front. And a little known fact, actually, the F-14 ATOPS allows the F-14 to be flown with just a pilot in the front. So they could theoretically fly without somebody in the back. But like I said, I had to pass all the NATOPS and learn how to work the radar, do radar intercept and hooking. I had one flight. I was the Air Wing flight surgeon in Air Wing 5, and it was a combat flight in an F-14. And I was in the ready room, ready to man up the aircraft and go flying. I think it was with Jody Richardson. And the Carey Air Wing commander came in because he was flying later on. The Air Wing commanders fly. And he came in and he looked up at the board for the day, the flight board, who was flying. And he looked around and he said, "Hey, Doc, how you doing?" I said, "Fine, CAG, doing great." He looked up, he was writing stuff down because he was flying. Then he realized I was on a green ink combat flight. And he goes, "Hey, Doc, you're going on a combat flight?" I said, "Yes, sir, I sure am." He goes, "What are you going to do if you engage the enemy?" I said, "Well, sir, I'm going to take the radar, hook them, press STT, and let the pilot shoot them down." He says, "Right answer. Have a good flight."
Chris, I want to go back to something that you said, which I thought was very interesting, just addressing a 2-doctor family, 2 spouses that are both in medicine. Can you tell us a little bit about, a little personal, if you don't mind, but how you met your wife and then what it's like, the pros and the cons, or the good things and the challenges about having 2 physicians in a relationship?
Great question. We were in medical school together and dated for a while and then broke apart. And it was even to the point that we both ran for student government president against each other. And I say, I won the election, but I've been paying for it ever since. Ended up getting back together our senior year, and then the rest is history. We're going on 36 years. I married 3 wonderful boys, absolutely amazing. Pam homeschooled the boys the entire time. The challenges were it was difficult for us both to pursue our primary interest area. My wife was interested in psychiatry. She got picked up for a residency in Bethesda, was ranked at the top of her internship class. I wanted to go this flight training route. She ended up being stationed with me overseas, raising the 3 wonderful young men. So that was a challenge balancing and it's true today for active duty military spouses, doing the balance and finding that right balance. And you just got to work through it. That's a challenge. The military does try to co-locate you and accommodate those issues. So that was very much of a challenge. The benefit was we had a wonderful career in life. The places that we went and around the world, and the people we met, things that we did were super, super memorable. My wife helped out a lot in the Aerospace Medical Association when I was president. There were a lot of responsibilities. She had the wing, which was the spouses organization. So those were the challenges and the positive side. You have to work on it. You just have to absolutely work on it.
Kris, our grand finale question is, can you give us one piece of advice that you were given from someone else that you have found impactful and you would like to share with our listeners?
Yeah, and I had kind of alluded to this earlier. As young physicians or aspiring physicians, if we have medical students, I love mentoring medical students, by the way, particularly in aerospace medicine, I tell them to pursue your passion. Sometimes it takes a while to figure out what your passion is. 2 years of the academics in medical school, and then 2 years of the clinical rotations. And it's okay that if you do a residency and you decide you don't like that, go back and do another residency. But find your passion and pursue it. Because 20 years from now, you want to wake up full of energy and go, I love what I'm doing. You're going to get paid pretty well in medicine. You'll be paid enough to take care of you and your family. So you might as well be doing what you really, really love. I found my passion, and that was aerospace medicine. I absolutely love it. All my friends, I tell asthma members, Aerospace Medical Association members, that I want to grow old with them. Well, now I say I am growing old with you.
Kris, thank you so much for spending time with us today. I think this is a great interview and we really appreciate it.
Thanks, Ian. Thank you so much for what you do. We really appreciate what you do.
This concludes our episode of Do or Do Not. Send all inquiries, comments, suggestions, and even let us know if there's someone you want us to interview to doordonotpodcast@gmail.com. Don't forget to like us on Facebook at Do or Do Not Podcast for updates. If you enjoyed our podcast, please share it with your classmates and administration. We have plenty of more interviews lined up, and we're excited to share them with you. This is Tian Yu Shea. Thank you guys so much for listening to Do or Do Not.